Well, welcome everyone. I'm really glad to see so many people here. Tonight's program is Sex Trafficking, Facts and Fictions. And I am Debbie Wiedinghoff, the president of National Council of Jewish Women, Chicago North Shore section. Thank you for joining our webinar. Please note that everyone is muted just to maximize any feedback noise, as you all can realize by now. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to use the chat. And as Gayle said, you'll probably be able to raise your hand and ask a question during the presentation. And don't forget about the little reaction emojis if you hear something that you want to comment on. JCAST, the Jewish Community Against Sex Trafficking, founded in 2013, is a program of NCJW, Chicago North Shore. JCAST was created to educate and engage those in Chicago and surrounding communities in sex trafficking prevention. JCAST is committed to ensuring that everyone can live a life free from coercion, violence, and exploitation. Before I introduce tonight's presenters, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the emotional impact from the events of the past week. I know that I am still trying to process what I witnessed on television on January 6th in the nation's capital. So in this challenging time, we appreciate that you are here to learn about a difficult and disturbing topic. If you find the conversation at any time overwhelming, please feel free to leave the session. Now it is more important than ever to prioritize self-care. JCAST falls under the leadership of NCJW Director of Violence Against Women Initiatives, Sherry Petlin. Sherry also oversees Luggage for Freedom, Trafficked Teens, Silent Witness, and Court Watch. To learn more about these programs, as well as JCAST, please visit our website, ncjwcns.org. Now it's my pleasure to introduce tonight's presenters. Gayle Nelson, Engagement and Development Director of JCAST, and Cathy Carmody, NCJW Life member and a JCAST Steering Committee member. And now I turn the evening over to Cathy and Gayle.
Oh, thank you, Debbie. Thanks for the introduction. I assume everyone can hear me. I have my presentation up in movie mode, and I can see some of you, but I just want to make sure if you have any issues or anything, put something in the chat or raise your hand, and Gayle or Melissa or somebody else will notice and let us know. I don't know if you know, January is Human Trafficking Awareness Month. So while you might not want to have a whole heck of a lot more awareness these days beyond insurrection and impeachment right now, we do appreciate you attending our first of a three-part series on sex trafficking. But unlike political players, this form of slavery, which is what we call it, this form of slavery goes on despite who's in power. So we had a note from your RSVP letter included your ability to send a note in, and one of the notes we received was somebody who really wants to understand the difference between forced sex trade and when people decide to choose to be in the sex for pay field. So we'll talk about that, but not right this minute. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. But again, feel free to ask any questions that you have in the chat. Because from our point of view, it's a form of slavery, sex trafficking. And it's, slavery of various types has existed for millennia, right? We Jews managed to get out of Egypt. We were slaves. The Civil War was fought over slavery. And so we consider sex trafficking a modern form of slavery. And we hope that just like those other forms of slavery have ended, that we can end this too. Now, of course, that's a pipe dream, but we can work towards reducing it and certainly have you understand about it, because our real purpose here is not to, we're not super duper experts in sex trafficking. What we are here to do is to help you really find a way to help you be more comfortable discussing healthy relationships with your loved ones, and especially the youth in your lives, because it's really about values and what you understand about relationships as well as sex, and how you want to share those values and those beliefs about relationships and sex. And so part of what we do is, part of what we believe is that if we educate well, then our youth, educate parents, right? Well, our youth are less likely to be enticed into the sex trade, and that hopefully we'll be able to reduce the demand as well. So we started with some teasers, as I recall, that you received in the mail, the email. Let me see, why is my, there it goes. So it's the first of 3 virtual sessions. Tonight's about facts and fictions, and it's really meant to build on the definitions of sex trafficking and some basics, so that over the next 2 sessions, like I said, we can talk about healthy relationships. And we called the third one Sex or Pay, Work or Pray. And if you notice, the or is in gray, and we did that on purpose because it really is a gray issue when we talk about women and independence and freedom and choice. And so we'll spend some time talking about that. As I said, it's about values, and we will not be imposing our values on you. We want you to help uncover your own, so that when you're talking with your family and the youth in your lives, that you're comfortable doing that with them. However, when we do have a particular point of view, we will let you know about that. And one of them that we'll talk about is the sex for pay issue. And I'll let you know up front that our belief is that we do not believe that women, or men, mostly it's women, but should be sold like a sack of potatoes. So that's where we come down on that one, but we'll talk about that a little more fully in a bit. So the pre-session questions, most of you, looks like have put something in the chat. So get your chat up, because what we want to do is have you guess on a number of 1 to 10, what number is human trafficking? And this, at this point, it includes both labor and sex trafficking, even though we're going to split it off. On the list of the top 10 criminal enterprises, stick a number in there and hit enter. What do you think? 3, 3, 2, 3, 3. Oh, you guys think it's a pretty big deal.
3s, I saw 1.
Yeah. Okay.
2s.
Actually, recently it became tied with number 2, which is illegal guns. And of course, number 1, usually drugs, right? And the numbers are controversial, because I'm not sure anybody really knows the numbers anyway, but some of the recent ones we've seen are $150 billion with a B for trafficking, and 99 billion of that is sex trafficking. So part of what we are wanting to impress upon you is this is really not necessarily about sex. This is about business and power. So a lot of what, well, let's go on with the other ones. So how about this one? What do you think? Give us a number in the chat. Probably more than 100, probably under 1 million.
It's 450.
Okay.
There's a 300, 750. Up there's 1,000. Is it 500?
Do I hear 10,000? Oh, there we
Thousands,
go.
yeah.
So here's the answer. It's a lot. Of course, it's a range, because we don't really know. So Juanita's got an idea there. So it's a lot of women and children and men, of course, but and that's every day in Chicagoland. So this is a big issue. It's big business. And how about this one? What % of trafficked survivors are born in the US? So we're talking about, part of what we're going to talk about tonight is stereotypes, right? And fact and fiction. So what's your stereotype telling you is the percentage of trafficked survivors who are US born?
Oh, now we're all over the place. I saw a 25 and now I saw an 80.
good, because I can't really see mine. Oh wait, how do I get my chat back?
There's a 75 and a 50. Yep, we're
Okay, so right now, as we know of it now, it's 86%. So most of us tend to think, right, that this is from somebody who's kidnapped from Vietnam and brought to the US, or kidnapped from the street somewhere and done something to. And what we'll see is, yes, that's the case, just not a whole lot of cases, or not the majority of cases. And while you're at it, how about this? Is a bonus question. Some of you are NCJW members, and if not, we have recently had an 18-week anti-racism is a verb program on Facebook, and anybody could join. And each week we had prompts and videos or articles or whatever, and you could have a discussion with people for that particular week. And so we thought we'd ask a bonus question, which is, when you first read these other 3 questions, did you see white Americans in your mind's eye? Because when we talk about who the victims and survivors are, you'll see we've got stereotypical views there too, because most of us tend not to think that these are white American girls. And
I see that Laurel has her hand up. I'm trying to find her in my, oh, there we are, Laurel.
She's typing a question or asking a question?
Okay.
I
All right,
think
Laurel, I think you can talk now. Go ahead.
I think I hit the wrong button. Sorry.
That's okay. Great to see. We can get everyone involved. That's great.
And then again, as a reminder, this is a heavy topic. So if it triggers you, you need to do what makes you feel comfortable. If it's, you know, sticking a sticky over your camera so nobody can see you, you can do that. If you got to get up, if you have to leave, that's fine. If you need, for some people, it's asking a question or typing something in the chat. Feel free to do that as well. So here's our agenda real quickly. We'll go a little bit through what JCAST is and what we do. We'll define sex trafficking. We'll tell you what it looks like in Chicagoland, as well as in the Jewish community, because people tend not to think it's a Jewish community issue, but we know it is. And then we'll set the context for you, or that'll help set the context for you to hear about the other 2 issues we'll talk about that will the whole thing will lay the groundwork for the next two sessions. We'll talk about cultural stereotypes in pornography. And again, there too, we have some facts and fictions. So let's start with who we are. NCJW, as many of you know, was founded in 1893. Well, let's see, let me see what you've got that up there. Let me see, JCAST. We don't see NCJW page.
No, it's not moving. It's not moving, Cathy. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, let's see what's going on here. Oh, there we go.
Here we go.
Okay, so JCAST is a program of NCJW.
It moved back.
It went back?
Yeah. There you go.
Okay, start there. National Council of Jewish Women was started in 1893 here in Chicago. It's the oldest Jewish women's organization in the US, and we have a history of working on violence against women. In fact, NCJW volunteers were at Ellis Island at the turn of the prior century, because young women would come over as single Jewish women and end up in the sex trade. And so they were working even then to stop that. Our JCAST program, I don't know if Stacy, I thought Stacy might have signed up. I don't know if she's on the program, but Stacy Safe was one of the co-founders of this program in 2013. We formed an official coalition in 2014 and received our first grant funding for 2015 and a continuation in 2016 from the Jewish Women's Foundation of Metropolitan Chicago. And we like to think that we actually helped spark attention to this area over the last few years and have now become a program of the NCJW North Shore section. So from our perspective, we see sex trafficking really as commercialized domestic violence. We spent a lot of work in NCJW dealing with domestic violence, which you think of as also known as intimate partner violence, sort of the one-on-one thing. But if you look at sex trafficking, we like to think of it as the MBA of domestic violence. Gayle, you want to say who you are?
Yeah, I just want to quickly say hello. I'm Gayle Nelson, and I am the Engagement and Development Director for JCAST, and I'm just excited to have all of you here.
And I'm a longtime member and volunteer. I spent most of my career in corporate America working in human resources and strategy, and been a volunteer dealing with women's issues for a long time. I also serve on the board of a domestic violence agency in Chicago called Between Friends. So I guess I kind of work at the micro and the macro level of domestic violence that way. So we're going to go from there now. If you recognize the name of this building, feel free to type it into the chat. I took a picture of it and cut the name off the top. But while you're deciding whether what it is, I'll let you know that the picture down at the bottom left is from an article from 2017 from Arlington Heights, where Arlington Heights Motel, where these particular men were arrested in a sex trafficking sting. And so you can see from their pictures that this is a multi-ethnic issue, different ages. The stereotypes of certain types of men who are involved really don't hold. We'll talk a little bit about some of the generic type issues, but pretty much it's everywhere. And yes, people know it's the Optima building. It's about 1.5 miles from my house in Skokie. And in 2017, they raided, I guess it was like 7 or 8 apartments in there that had been hosting, and in this case, it was foreign women since 2014. And people who lived there were always wondering, why are there so many men coming at 24 hours a day in and out of these apartments? And that's why. So they uncovered a prostitution ring there. I thought I saw somebody say that, yes, it's by the Holocaust Museum, but somebody say she was in Lombard. We did a program out at Etz Chaim in Lombard, and instead of using this picture, we used a picture from a strip mall out there where a massage parlor it was being used for prostitution. And actually, the massage sort of health spa business is really one of the biggest ones for this. So you're probably wondering, well, what the heck is human trafficking? Maybe we should define it for you. So it's sex trafficking is a part of human trafficking. Human trafficking is the sort of big umbrella piece. And as we said before, the sex trafficking piece, at least that what we know of, is by far the biggest in terms of dollars. But the definition is that it's the recruitment, sort of the finding, the recruiting, the transporting of people within or across boundaries. So you tend to think of it having to be across boundaries, whether state or national, and that's not true. It can be within or across boundaries by force, fraud, or coercion. And that's for the purpose of exploiting them economically, whether it's labor trafficking or sex trafficking. So it's really commercial sex acts, services that are induced via force, fraud, or coercion. And you think about the what part. The what is the recruiting and the transferring and the holding. The how is what you see on your screen. So via force, fraud, or coercion. This is the federal definition here. And the why is, why are they doing this? Because of the business around prostitution, sexual exploitation, forced labor, and to a lesser degree, organ harvesting, but we tend not to hear too much about organ harvesting. Some important things to note, one of them is that if the victim, the survivor, is under 18, then you only really need to show the recruiting and the exploitation. It's because, especially in Illinois, it's automatically considered force, fraud, or coercion if the person is under the age of 18. And some of our language has changed over that, about that in the years. over the years. It used to be a child prostitute. There's no such thing as a child prostitute. Anybody under the age of 18 doing this is basically a victim. So what does it look like though? So that's sort of how it's defined. But if you think about what does it really look like, there's a bunch of organizations out there. One of them is the Polaris Project, which is where I got some of this information from. The picture on the left, I just actually got today from their 2019 report. And this particular page talks about sort of the top 5 of risk factors, or the top 5 mechanisms, the recruitment tactics. I don't know how well you can see it. You're not meant to really read the whole thing. You can go find it yourself online from the Polaris Project. But we really wanted you to understand via their little video, which is only a minute long, that this really is criminal enterprises in a lot of different businesses.
They mow our lawns and vacuum our offices, paint our nails and paint our houses. They are in the room next door or the house next door. They're in strip malls where anyone can see them, but most of us don't, because most of us don't know where to look. Until now. In 2017, Polaris analyzed one of the largest human trafficking data sets in the United States. We took the broad concepts of sex trafficking and labor trafficking and broke them down into what they really are: criminal operations within 25 distinct businesses. Now, we know where to find them. Now we can start to understand how they got there, how traffickers work, how the businesses are run. Now we know. Now we end it.
So one of the fictions, if tonight's theme is fact and fictions, one of the fictions is that most victims are kidnapped off the streets. It's sort of like you see that in the movies, right? The graphic that you see though might be a surprise, because it shows that 46% of those being trafficked know their victim. How is that the case? So for how many of you is that a surprise? I mean, I can't really see a show of hands, but I see some hands. I can't see everybody. But how can that be? Often they know that person through a process that we call grooming or luring. And we'll talk about some examples of that. But while the majority of victims are girls, boys are also trafficked. And they're often from the LGBTQ community. They tend to be homeless, locked out of the house. If people are not accepting of the different possibilities in gender and relationships that their children might favor, and they lock those children out of the house, they often are victimized. Poverty, immigrants are often power played in this area in this way. People who are disengaged from their families. Often, you'll find that the children in the justice and child welfare systems have often been abuse victims, and so there's a whole world of what happens because people lure or groom their victims into becoming part of the system. And imagine now, what's it like in a pandemic? Well, it doesn't really stop. And so it's something that we need to think about. What's actually increased is the nature of the video. Here we are, we're online right now. So everything's gone a lot more virtual. And there was just, I think it was today's New York Times or Trib, one of the papers had an article about women who, because of economics now, are joining one of the, what would you call it, a sort of a subscription porn site, because they're selling their pictures online to get money. So let's bring it down to Chicago. We think of it as two parts or two parts of an equation. There's the trafficked, There's the people who are trafficked, and then there's the Johns who buy their services. We talked about the 16 to the 25,000 women and children per day. What you may not know is that the average age of girls entering this business is 14. And that 1 out of 3 runaway teens are trafficked within 48 hours. Because what are they going to do? They need a place to stay, they need some food, they need money. So they engage in what's, half of them anyway, they engage in survival sex. It's the only way they can survive, so they do it. The men, I don't know how much of this surprises you. More than half of them purchase more than once a month, or once a month or more. And they have regular partners. That means they're married or they have significant others. So one of the things we need to talk about is, what is this supply demand issue? And we will talk a little bit about that as well. Happens at any age. How many of you remember the documentary about Michael Jackson? It's called Leaving Neverland. If you haven't seen it, I really encourage you to find it. I don't know where, library, YouTube, somewhere. Leaving Neverland, it's very long. The first hour, if nothing else, it would be great to watch, or the first couple hours, 90 minutes, whatever, because the documentarian actually builds the video as if you are being lured, as the young boys were by Michael Jackson. And so it really, really shows you how it happens. The U.S. gymnastics team, you might recall that it's just really terrifying, but that the girls being abused by Dr. Nasser had their mothers on the other side of the screen in some cases. Jeffrey Epstein, so there's, and Robert Kraft, a couple well-known members of the Jewish community. Ghislaine Maxwell. What's cool about that whole example is we often don't get information about or understand the issues around the people who are enabling and working with the traffickers. So as that story unfolds, which it is doing now, that will be really very instructive. And then I am not a fashion mogul. I think this thing I've had since like high school. So Peter Nygaard was a new name to me, but he also now is on our best list, right? The Making of the Girl, note you see down at the bottom of the page, video is a way that you can look. It's about a 5-minute video, so we don't really show it in our programs. But it'll show you how a young girl from the southwest sides was lured into the business. But that's the stereotypical part. So we didn't really want to show that as much as let you know that sex trafficking, for instance, in Wisconsin is a huge issue. And there is a series on YouTube you can find where this one woman goes through her story and explains how she was victimized. This is about a 25-second part where she talks about how she was lured in.
I befriended the guy's girlfriend, so I befriended his girlfriend, and then we became friends. And it's you're young and you like to have a best friend or feel like you have a best friend, and it's fun to go with someone to get your nails done, and so they lure you in through materialistic items.
So she starts explaining how that's done. And one of the things that we know is that often this pattern of abuse can begin in adolescence, and that parents really don't pay attention and don't know that sex trafficking occurs in their communities because they're unable to identify the warning signs that their teen might be in a violent relationship. So there are a lot of teen dating programs being developed. This is Human Trafficking Awareness Month. February is Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month. And we certainly can share a little bit more about that, but you will probably hear more about that in February. So that's the basics kind of sex trafficking. we wanted to switch now to the fact and fiction around cultural messages we receive, because the purpose of doing this is to develop youth who understand the difference between stereotypes and reality and not boxing people in. If you think about the fact and fiction of all the messages we received when we were young, holy cow. I mean, not that I really ever wanted to be a princess. I grew up with 4 brothers, so I kind of wanted to be an athlete. But if you think about the cultural messages around us, that's not new, right? We live in a culture of objectification of women and men, and especially in the media. So what those of us who are sort of on the other side of the hill, what do we remember? We remember movies like Pretty Woman, and sort of glamorizes prostitution. The thing that's changed, though, is that the children are exposed much more easily, and most of it's free, right? They can go online or on their phones and find it. So when we were talking about this for the Princess Problem, I decided to do a search, and I came up with, I think it's 366 million hits on a Google search in, whatever part of a second that takes. So when we think about princess culture, what are we talking about? What kind of messages? Maybe feel free to type some in the chat, what you think those messages are. There's a 4-year-old at my back neighbor, and for Halloween, she was a princess. And so I remember when we were talking about it and her mother was around, and I asked her if she was going to be a lawyer princess or was she going to be an engineer princess? And she kind of looked at me funny, but her mother thought it was great. And so we want to talk about, when we're talking with our youth, there's nothing wrong with doing princess stuff. It's just a matter of what values do you want them to have and what expectations do you want to set for them so that they feel that their sexuality is not something that is negative, or they're allowed to flaunt it as in the movies, but not really feel it or not use it for pleasure. So we want them to see themselves, the girls and the men, as a source of strength and power and independence. So we think about it from a Jewish perspective, right? Jewish girls we're supposed to be perfect, and we're supposed to avoid conflict and preserve harmony. But my experience is lots of cultures are like that for the women. And so it's not just Jewish culture. Who's ever heard of the man box? This idea was started around the 80s by a guy out in Oakland, California. And here I've got Tony Porter's link to his TED Talk in 2010. You can look at that as well. And in some of our programs, we play a little bit of that. His notion was, just like the girls are in the Princess Problem, men are socialized into a box as well. They're not allowed to cry. They're not allowed to express emotions except anger or rage. They have to be aggressive. They have to be dominant. And so he started working with a lot of men to help them understand that they also need to be a whole emotional person. But now, what do you do with the folks who don't want to choose either of those, that choose not to be binary for their gender? And I don't know if you know, but the Field Museum now doesn't call Sue he. They call, Sue the dinosaur. Sue is a they now. So people are, if the Field Museum is getting it, then a lot of other people are getting it, to understand that it's okay if you're 15 years old and you want to be, a boy one day and maybe a little more feminine the next day. That's okay. And I will admit, I just recently in December binged on Schitt's Creek and really agreed with all of whoever said that it was a great show, because nobody really paid much attention in a negative way to people's gender. It was just people were who they were. And so I didn't have the patience for the whole thing, but I did watch seasons 1, 2, and 6. So however he found his partner, I don't know. I'll have to find that in the future. But the point is that when teens, not just teens, anybody is being put in whatever box they have, we have to figure out, as people loved by us, how are we going to handle that and how are we going to talk about that? And that's why we talk so much about what are the cultural messages that we're experiencing. They're everywhere. Any chat, Gayle, that we need to hear or mention yet?
Nope, we're all good.
Okay. So pornography, where does this fit in and why are we talking about this? Well, remember, our goal is to inform you about sex trafficking. And so we need to discuss how, and mainly men, of course, they're the majority of purchasers, profiteers, and perpetrators. How do they come to see purchasing sex as acceptable? That's really the problem from our point of view, is that people see purchasing sex as acceptable. So whether you believe that purchasing sex should be legal or not, it's a huge issue. We are not going to resolve that issue tonight, and we're probably not going to resolve it as a group together very much at all. But our point of view is, like I said, we don't believe that purchasing sex is a valid business proposition. We don't think youth grow up wanting to be prostitutes. If you ask a 8-year-old girl what she wants to be when she grows up, I've never heard one say, I want to be a prostitute. So it's a huge topic, and we know this is awkward for people in the room. There's this virtual room is full of people with different beliefs about whether porn is acceptable. Again, we're not trying to change your values about this. We want you to choose what your values are if you haven't done so consciously, and be able to articulate those to your children so that you can be more comfortable about having conversations about relationships. So what we wanted to do was throw a bunch of numbers at you. As it says, the porn sites like Pornhub have more visitors than Netflix, Amazon, and Twitter combined. And think of all the stuff you download. 35% of all internet downloads are porn. So somebody's downloading a lot because I don't download any. Think about what it's like for children at home now during the pandemic, when they accidentally encounter porn during their homework online searches before the pandemic, because those people trying to sell or lure children in know how children misspell things and misspell sites, and they capture those. And then the next thing you know, a child is looking at porn. The average age of when a boy first sees porn is 11. And I only got the numbers for 2019, but 42 billion is the number of visits to Pornhub during 2019. So imagine what it's like. I don't even know if they're sharing the numbers for during a pandemic, because actually for a lot of people, you just have a Zoom call and you can see somebody walking around behind you naked, as they've shown on TV with some of the kids in school. But I think one of the more significant ones is that the 46 to 48%, they purchase sex to obtain sex acts that they either are uncomfortable asking their partners to do, or which their partners have refused to do. So a question is kind of what's going on around our having conversations around sex with our partners. And that's sort of way beyond what we do. But the point is, if people are out there purchasing sex, I don't know if it's for the novelty, if you would call that novelty or desire, it's still something where, why do they have to be purchasing that? And so that's something for us to think about. There are a couple sites at the bottom for you to use if you want to investigate some things further. We're happy to send anything. Psychology Today is pretty good with some short readable articles around anything you want to find about this. And yet, it's sort of not our father's pornography. It still skews sexual and relationship expectations, but it's more real than ever, because first of all, it's video. In our day, you got Playboy magazine, or you found a copy of Lady Chatterley's Lover or something, but now it's free. It still objectifies, degrades men and women, and illustrates unrealistic expectations. So our point here is to educate, don't blame or shame, youth when they come to you. We want you to feel comfortable that when they come to you, you have something to say, such as, look, these videos are staged just like movies. And that's really not how people engage in regular sexual behavior. So I can give you an example where it says Grand Theft Auto. Now, the only way I've seen Grand Theft Auto is when my now 28 and 30-year-old nephews were young. And I was back in my hometown, St. Louis, visiting my brother, and they had Grand Theft Auto playing the game. The only way they were allowed to do that was with my brother was in the room with them, because it was pretty violent. And I imagine it still is, even more high tech. And so when the whores who, of course, in the video, they're called hoes. And when they would come out and they would get shot and whatever, all the terrible stuff that would happen, my brother would say to them, now, this isn't real. And I just would hear him say, now, this isn't real. And he just kept saying that over and over again. And so when we first started doing these programs a couple of years ago, I called them up and I said, hey guys, would you mind if I use the Grand Theft Auto story about you? And they're like, no, fine. And they sort of both said at the same time, I know it's not real. So clearly my brother got through to them. And I find that such a great story about how you can deal with these things as a parent. And then, I don't know, don't most of us wish that our parents or relatives had more conversations with us about these things? I mean, for me, my mother, I had Grey's Anatomy in the bathroom. Remember Grey's Anatomy, like medical book? So no, that wasn't the best way to teach me about biology before some of those other books came out. But think about what you want to avoid in terms of how you were brought up to talk about these issues, but what you want to replicate. So I would replicate the kind of thing that I saw with my brother, where you kept reminding the children that this isn't real. So it is uncomfortable having these kind of conversations. The key, of course, is to keep having them until both you and the people you're talking with, the youth or the children, are feeling more comfortable. What's our time? We've got a few minutes left. So when we think from there, that's loading you with a lot of information. We thought it would be useful to say, okay, you're probably saying to yourself, well, okay, so what can I do about this? I don't know if you know who Marion Hatcher is. She works for Tom Dart in the Cook County Sheriff's Office. Tom Dart is one of the guys who really first started organizing these countrywide stings at events like the Super Bowl or the World Series or March Madness, because at all these huge events around the country, certainly before the pandemic, were huge business opportunities for sex trafficking, and girls would be brought in from all over the place. And it was just an enormous opportunity for them to do stings. And so usually every year, they've got the resources to make big stings once or twice a year. And actually, that's kind of how Robert Kraft, when he was caught the morning, I think it was the morning of either the day of or the day before the Super Bowl, when his team, the New England Patriots, were in it. He was in Florida, and then he went up to wherever the Super Bowl was. So it's a big thing. But if we can end the demand, then the traffickers won't make any money getting the supply. So one of the things you can do is what you're doing now. You're educating yourselves. You can educate your family, your colleagues. It's sort of, the water cooler now is kind of changed, at least until the pandemic is over. So it might be hard to have these kind of conversations over Zoom. But you can also listen to how, during the Zoom chats, how do people objectify other people? I haven't been to the gym since March, so I guess there's no locker room talk right now for me. But when there is, you can have zero tolerance for locker room talk. And you can hold the purchasers accountable, just like Tom Dart does. He will print names and pictures in the newspaper. And I remember when a guy from Highland Park was in one of those sting prints. And you can imagine having to explain this to your wife, right? You can advocate for policy change. You can support survivors in a lot of ways. We do everything from, collecting gift cards to give to the young women on the street so that at least they can have a little spending money. And you can encourage disincentives, which is the kind of thing that Tom Dart does as well. So we gave you a quick overview of sex trafficking. We pointed to some issues regarding our children's vulnerability to being trafficked and focused a little bit on action. But I think it's also important that you hear about a true story of a trafficked teen. And these are trafficked teens. I can't really see a picture of me, but I know I put my background to this picture of trafficked teens, and I think Gayle has it as well. These are life-size cutouts of children who have been trafficked. And we print out and post on their cutout their story. And we loan these out to organizations around the metro area, a lot of high schools and colleges, for instance, and synagogues and churches and everybody who wants to have this kind of discussion around healthy relationships. And Maggie was from Highland Park, and I'll read it in case you can't really see it, but Maggie met Brock, a boy from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, at the local mall. For several weeks, Maggie and Brock exchanged text messages and eventually started dating. Maggie adored Brock and introduced him to her parents. They adored him too. Brock invited Maggie to Milwaukee to meet his parents. When she arrived, he picked her up and suggested they go to his favorite restaurant for dinner. And then he invited her to dance and showed her to a private room. Brock convinced Maggie she was choosing to have sex with bar guests because it made Brock happy. By the end of that night, she had lost track of the number of men she had had sex with. So these things, it's astounding how these stories can happen, and they're true stories. It doesn't sound like it could happen, but these are true stories that, are in the papers all the time. Questions, thoughts? Could be overwhelming. So take a second and in the chat function, enter a word or a short phrase for what you're thinking right now about sex trafficking, about this session or what you learned, but don't hit enter yet. Just take a second and type it in there before you hit enter, and then we'll get to see the cascade, what we call the waterfall cascade from everybody. So once you've picked a word or a phrase, I'm gonna say 1, 2, 3, hit enter. What do we get? It's overwhelming. Yes, very widespread. What else?
Invisible, happens all around us. Looking forward to discuss volunteer opportunities. I want to see everyone educated about this. Yes.
Yes, the whack-a-mole, absolutely. Please put the ACT page up again. I can do that.
Underestimated, absolutely.
That ACT page?
And we want to bring this up so that we can build awareness, right? And not be, and so we can move this forward and make change. Denied by many, absolutely.
So the first session here is to really give you this overview and in a way to kind of overwhelm you so that you see that this really is a significant issue. But what we hope by the end of the 3 sessions is to help you increase your comfort level with conversations around these things. And that when you mention the word sex or whatever, you don't get all embarrassed, that it becomes something that it's okay and that you're modeling for people, that it's important to talk about, and that you become a supportive resource for the people, the people you are comfortable with and the people you love in your lives. And that also, from our perspective, the goal is to help decrease the number of people who purchase sex, because if we can do that, if we can help people become, help boys and girls understand that this is not the way to have a relationship, then maybe we can reduce the number of people who are exploited for sex, because we reduce the demand, which reduces the business.
So Amy's got her hand raised too. Let's see if we can find Amy. There's Amy.
Hi.
Hi, Amy.
I just wanted to tell somebody what my experience was with this topic. I found, I like reading young adult novels, and I found one called What Unbreakable Looks Like. And it's about a girl who was trafficked, who, is trying to come back into society. Anyway, the reason I'm mentioning it is it was a really good way for me to understand what this was all about without it being overwhelming. And I mean, it's upsetting, but the way this is written, because it's written for young adults, it sort of softens it. And I wanted to mention the book because I thought it was very well done. And I think sometimes, we want to learn about this stuff, but if it's too much, we get turned off instead of interested. So that was one thing. And then I watched a movie called The Chosen Ones about sex labor in Mexico. I just found both of those a really good introduction, in case people are looking for things to read or see.
Well, thanks for sharing that. Is the Unbreakable book, is it fact or fiction?
I think it's fiction. What Unbreakable Looks Like. I think it's fiction, but it's based on.
Oh, yeah. Sure. I don't know if anybody on the call right now was a participant, but Talia Karner is a novelist, and we our section did a book, I guess a book club review with her book called The Third Daughter, I think it was called. And what she basically did was, I don't know if you remember from
Fiddler on the Roof.
Thank you. I'm thinking of the new sedition video, right? As opposed to a tradition. I don't know if you all saw that one, but
yeah.
So Fiddler is the third daughter in that sort of like nowhere, the 5 daughters or whatever. And so what Talia does is she took the third daughter and did her research and made this fictional story based on the true facts that there was a Jewish sex trafficking ring based in Buenos Aires between 1870, I believe it was, and 1939, where the from Germany and Central Europe into Buenos Aires. And the book really is it's fiction, but it really gets at every single piece that you might want to learn about in terms of sex trafficking and how they lure the girls with promises of marriage and money, and they're usually they have a great nose for people who are poor or don't understand something. And so the traffickers have a great sense of whom to go after. So when you're, they know what schools to hang around, they know what parks to hang around to find the girls, and they're very good at it. So there was another book that was really very well done.
And Laurel has a question too. Go ahead, Laurel, or a thought.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so I don't want to get fired, so I'm not going to tell you where I work, but I work at a high school that has a lot of undocumented and a lot of low-income kids, and they move around a lot. And across the street, there's like a strip mall, like Chicago type, not suburban. And one of the stores there kind of came and go. And one of my students, who was very at risk, went there, and she came back and told me they were paying her like a lot of money for doing nothing. And that it was cool because her mom was doing it too. And if I, pressed any harder, she wouldn't talk. So I just kind of like thought maybe something was going on. And I talked to our SRO. Didn't care. And I talked to some of our people in truancy who are amazing. And they kind of talked to those people. And again, nothing was going on. And I'm pretty sure something was going on, but I didn't know who else I could report that to.
So when you're saying nothing's going on, that's what they were telling you. So it's not like you went to the police or.
Yeah, I went to the police, our SRO, which is our in-school cop.
But not to the out school cops.
No, because the in-school cop is part of, the
Right.
main police department, and they would have, I've done this before. So they're like, wait, you need to talk to your SRO.
Yes,
And then
there is, Yvonne, I saw her chat. There is a trafficking hotline that you can call, just as there would be a domestic violence hotline. So the thing to do is to call the hotline, which actually, according to Illinois law, in your break room, bathroom somewhere, there should be a sign, because by law, they're supposed to have some signs up about that. So if your school doesn't have that, you need to have them put one up.
can you put something in the chat about that? Because my school has nothing.
If not, we can find it for
We
you.
can talk.
Thank you, Melissa.
Oh, that's cool. So I'm going to look into that, and I'll be in touch with you. But it was a situation where I'm pretty sure I knew what was going on. And then I think the brother ended up being involved too, because the family was very complicated.
And it's very common. If you could see the list of how people are lured, it's very often other members of the family. This is not, like we said, it's not people just getting picked up off the street.
Exactly. And the store kind of came and went. So I went with my gut. So anyhow, this has been
exactly
great.
what we want. It's like the if you see something, say something piece. If you see, we did this program with the Hadassah group, I think it was a couple of years ago, and they were saying, there's some restaurants up on the North Shore where they keep seeing people in the outer parking lot, and they wondered what was going on, and girls and, guys and whatever. And so they told the police, and the police checked it out, and it turns out it really wasn't anything significant, and that's fine. But the police told her, please keep letting us know, because you can't really tell. So when you get suspicious and you start noticing these things, girls hanging around in the park and their hair, where you can't see them and they're
right,
whatever. So yeah, it's important to take action, but only if you're going to be safe doing it.
And my other part, as you're saying this, I had another young lady whose parent, she was from Nicaragua, and she'd been raped by a family member. And she would take off and go live in vacant houses. But if I went to the police, they just talk to her as a runaway. So what I'm going with is who's above the police? Because a lot of time the police in high crime areas just dismiss things.
Right. And I think a lot of times the police are uneducated, and that's why we need to get the certain states' attorneys' offices that have more experience and have better able to identify and to make and support these things too. We can definitely make those connections for you too.
And I'm not bashing you. Actually, I'm going to call and see if you want me to,
and
be involved. But we do, I believe, where I work, we have so many kids that have been violated.
Right. And as Kate mentioned, there are very few beds in Illinois for women of survivors of trafficking, even though if you look at the laws state by state, Illinois is one of the best when it comes to these kinds of laws. We were the first, I think, to decriminalize youth caught in prostitution. And so she said they're opening their first home in Cook County in 2021. How exciting. But yeah, we need more safe homes for women where they can recover. These are issues that the more we educate, we think the more people will pay attention, and the more we educate our folks who are elected officials, the same thing can occur. So it's great that you all are so interested in this, and some of you are already active in the area as well. It's very sad, like you said, and it's great that you all have the courage. We encourage you to have the courage to, when you see something, to try and do something about it. And then the next session, we hope you come back. We'll talk about healthy relationships and consent, and how do we talk to our youth about this? And then on March 3rd, we'll talk about sex for pay, work or prey. Is it sex work? Is it okay to be doing this? Or are people really being preyed upon? It's a great controversy, and I don't know if we'll answer it, or if there even is an answer. But we want you to be able to discuss it in a way that you're comfortable with it.
And Yvonne's got her hand up too. Where is Yvonne?
Good evening. Thank you all very much for the information. Great information. Do we need to re-register for the next sessions, or because we registered for this session, will automatically be included?
I think you need to re-register, but we're happy to leave me your email and I'll make sure to sign you up too. But it'd be great.
Yeah, that's a great question. They will so next time we'll have to do a quick review of what sex trafficking is for those who aren't here, but we're also trying to make them stand independently of each other. So it would be great to see you back. What else?
There'll be an email to invite you. So just look for it.
And feel free to contact us if we can answer any questions in the meantime. If you want to use the traffic teens, I forget how many we have, but aren't there also desktop versions?
There is. There's
we have little desktop versions that you can use. The ones in the picture behind me are about, well, let's see, I'm 5'5". I've shrunk a little on 5'5", so they're probably 5'3" or 5'4". There is one or two boys, the rest are girls, and each of their stories is on their cutout, and true stories of people in the Chicago area. So what were some of those words? Let's see. Can we see anything? Any other comments that people have or questions? There's another couple messages coming through. Oh, Aaron's Law. Yeah, we could always send back out that sheet, Gayle, of the 6 laws that got passed in 6 years.
Yep.
During the teen years, in the 20 teens, Illinois was really amazing in passing almost one law every year to support the people who are victims. Training in schools, yes. Well, I mentioned Between Friends, where I'm on the board. We have a program called a teen dating education program called the REACH program. And it is one of the few programs right now that's being taught virtually in the public schools. And it's a 6 or 8 week program, depending on how the school wants to organize it, around healthy relationships for the youth at school. And they absolutely love it. And we're actually in the process of trying to get it certified through the CDC, so that once you have a program that I'm sure you've all heard the new phrases lately about evidence-based things. So we're working on trying to show that it actually works. And once it gets approved by the CDC, which should take a couple more years because of the pandemic, it's hard to actually get into the schools. But that'll be a program that people can use to help educate youth. What ages? It's age appropriate from, I think it's 6th through 12th grades.
And we also have a program for college age students too that we use as well. So there's lots of opportunity to talk about our youth, talk with our youth, kind of make social change and change the dialogue. But I see that we're after 8. And so this has been a really great to talk with all of you. Any final thoughts? But it's been nice. We welcome the opportunity. We hope we see you on February 11th.
I have one, and that is I see Mary Bonnet's name. And if you don't know Mary, I will put in a plug for our local playwright, Mary Bonnet, who has written some wonderful plays, short plays on the topic of relationships and sex trafficking that our NCJW section has gone to and had some sort of post discussions with her. And she's done great work in this area. and helps educate youth and adults on relationships as well. So it's great to have her on here.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thanks so everyone for coming. We hope to see you on February 11th. And it's been really nice to spend an hour with you and to make social change. Only together can we change the conversation around this.
So good night, stay healthy. Let's get some snow.
Thank you, Cathy and Gayle and Sherry. Great presentation.
Thanks.
Yes, wonderful job.
Thanks. We can stay on for a sec if anybody wants to talk, but feel free. Oh, and then there's a post-event survey that you can fill out.
It's doing something weird.
I can see it. That's cool. Can everybody see it or just me? Oh, Melissa. You were so engrossed, Melissa, you forgot to put the survey up.
It's just 2 questions.
So Susan, what's the thing going on with Josh down in Missouri, Mr. Hawley?
501c3 girls.
All my friends are saying, I didn't vote for him.
Okay, this is great. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
I hope they get rid of him.
That was great, everybody, really.
Thanks for coming, Susan.
Well, thank you for this program. Yeah, I hope they get rid of Josh Hawley. I really do. He's horrible. But we do have that new Cori Bush. She's very outspoken.
Yeah, I've been watching her on TV. Oh, and now we get the pets in the scene.
We are getting snow and rain, and he's just a mess. Yeah, he gets migraines, I think.
Oh, ladies, I want to just tell you that was really good. Thank you so much. And the participants were an interesting group. So
Was good.
it was really good. So
So
I hope somebody captured all the chats because there were some good questions and
We can save it.
comments.
Save the chat.
Because there was a
I am
number
saving
of
the
people
chat.
who wanted to get interest, to do more. So that's cool.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going if you don't mind.
Good
All right,
night.
thanks, Debbie.
Thank you
Good night.
all. I really appreciate it. You guys did
Thanks,
great.
Melissa.
Thanks, Melissa.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Take care, everybody.
Thank you. Oscar, you have to get down. Come on.
I'm ending.